So talk to us a little bit about, I mean, you are so many amazing things. You are an author and a pastor, which I'm all about. I'm a PK, so hey. And, you know, you have started this amazing initiative, Black Admin Magic, and you're
Yes.
to the provost at Spelman College, which is amazing that you are
Yeah.
at HBCU. So I love it. So talk to us a little bit about who you are and how you became an EA. I want to hear your story.
I kind of like was told that that is the thing for me to do. Kind of like voluntold when I took a position somewhere that someone was like, I really see this for you. And at the time, I kind of was like, no, not really. But after I got really into the role, I really saw that it was a great fit for me. And I was just really good at it. But to tell you a little bit about myself, like you said, I'm a pastor, I'm a PK, but first of all, I'm a child of God. I do believe I have a strong faith, and but also I'm married. I have children. Say what now? What'd you say?
No, I was being your amen corner.
Oh, like amen. But I'm married. I have kids, and a family. I'm in school full time. I'm actually, like I said, I pastor. I work at Spelman College. I've written a book about the profession, and right now have started an organization called Black Admin Magic, which supports people of color in the administrative profession. But just to kind of talk about diversity and to bring some light to that side of the profession as well. So I don't, it's kind of hard to talk about yourself. So I keep it, like really basic because I'm really down to earth. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
What made you write your book?
Oh, my husband writes, and so he inspired me to write something about it to kind of help people in the profession. And at first, I will tell you that my journey, it didn't start off with me thinking that I would actually write a book. I actually was thinking I would write a manual to kind of teach about what it's like to be an EA.
Yeah.
But that was because I really did not believe in myself enough to say that I could write a book. So I thought, you know what, I'll just write a little 10-page manual, something that's unassuming. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. Because I was afraid of failure. I was afraid that stepping out there to write a book, I'm like, who would read my story? Like, why would I do that? And then when I decided to review what I had put together, and I told, let me back up. I know this is I'm trying to, I remember reading the manual out loud to myself, and I've shared this story before, and it didn't sound anything like me. It was not telling my story as an EA. It just was really boring. It was blah. I don't like to be cookie cutter. It was something that you probably could already download, on the website, like how to manage organization, what it looks like. So I kind of balled it up, and then something inside of me just said, just tell your story, write your story about how you got into this role, what you've learned from the role, and it just flowed from there. And so it's a really interesting read. I think people would be inspired by it. And it's funny. It'll have you crying, laughing, and things like that. So
what I loved about it is that it was just so you, and it wasn't because I think that's something that I really struggle with too, is in business, like how do you project who you are as a person, as a woman, just being authentic to who you are. Because I think there's just it can be really challenging out there at how do you balance all of it. So I love that it's just, you were just kind of like you and laid yourself out there. So talk to me about Black Admin Magic. So the very first time I ever heard BAM at all was in a Facebook group, and I was cracking up because there was a lady that was posting, and I think she was posting it she didn't mean it to be funny, or she was pretty frustrated, and she was kind of posting about, she started a new job, and she's like, okay, I've been there a week, can people stop talking about my hair and stop asking to touch it? And I laughed because my son, he just cut off his afro, but that's like the most frustrating thing for him, is when people will ask him to like put their fingers in his hair, and he's like, no,
No.
like, no, like, why would you ask me to do that? But that was the first time and somebody had said like, oh, you should come and join our BM group. And I just thought that was really interesting. I didn't even know at the time that that was you and that you started it. So what made you kind of, start Black Admin Magic, and what was the catalyst for it?
Um, I we already know that we're fighting. I know your great platform about EA revolution and just bringing light to the profession, and movement for people to recognize that as administrators we have value, right? So
Yeah.
when we think about that, we actually there's no other position that I've ever seen that has like training manuals to ask for training. They I remember going to IAP and I'm like, they actually have like there's a science that you have to ask for training. So you've got to ask your boss to show that you have value, and
Yeah.
there's an investment, that you're investment worthy for your professional development, right? So we've got that idea going on that we are just admins, right? I think there's someone
Yeah.
that has, I'm not just an admin. So when I think about that aspect of it, I had to fight. I've had moments where I've had that struggle, working in a position that people don't see your value, they don't invest in you. You're just the person that gets the coffee, you're just the person that pushes the paper, you're the person that catches the
Yeah.
projects that no one else wants to do. So you have that thing going on. But then also there's another layer if you're a minority, right? So think
Yeah.
about, you're in this position as an admin, you've already have to fight through the idea of, I have value, I am an important person in this organization, I bring something, you should invest in my professional development, just like you do your VPs, just like you do your executive
Yeah.
directors of them, right? But then you have this other layer that if you're in an organization that's predominantly white, or you are in an office with other admins that, and I've had that experience where I was the only Black face in the room and
Yeah.
I was the admin. So I had to fight, or I felt the pressure, of dealing with that layer of being just an admin, but then also too being the minority in the room. And so I've had conversations with people that have had the same experience. And I wrote an article about it on LinkedIn, and that's just kind of where all of it was birthed out of, to kind of say, you know what, we need to have a little D&I conversation, D&I's diversity and inclusion conversation when it comes to administrative professionals and being people of color, being the only person in the space. And it also is inclusive of men. I even had that moment of, when I think about looking and seeing a man that's an administrative professional, that you're like, you, like, because it's heavily women. So it's just kind
Yeah.
of starting the conversation, about it, and being aware that it's out there, that there are people that feel that way,
Yeah.
and just bringing strength, collaborating, and coming together. So yeah.
I think it's such an important thing. I just did an event here in Austin, and
Uh-huh.
I let everybody kind of vote on what they wanted to hear for this lunch and learn. And the topic of conversation that came up the most is really around confidence. And even for those of you that are joining us today, when you guys signed up and registered, a lot of you were saying, I want to talk about confidence, I want to talk about getting a seat at the table, and all of those things together. And I know you and I were talking about this story. I think across the board, EAs struggle with
Yeah. Yeah.
having a seat at the table regardless. And then when you start adding all those different layers, whether you're woman supporting men or if you're a person of color, and you kind of like layer all of those things on, it can be really challenging.
It really
And,
can.
for me, you and I were talking about this the other day, but for me, as I progress in my career, I've had to learn, like, how do I say when someone says to me, I don't understand what you do, or, kind of every time you insert yourself, the way they like to put it, like, oh, Melissa's inserting herself. And you kind of figure out, like, how do you respond?
Yeah.
And we were sort of talking about, I went into this meeting and there was like, I don't know, 20 men. I was the only woman in the room. And the person came up to me and said, in front of everyone, okay, Melissa, but admins aren't needed in this meeting. And when you start laying, okay, how I responded was one way, but could you respond as a Black woman? Could you respond in the same way? Maybe or maybe not, because then you have
Maybe
that
not.
whole like you're an angry Black woman, or all of these different things
Yeah.
that can get layered on top of it. And I love that you're talking about it, because literally nobody is. I mean, I just have not heard anybody say, "Hey guys, there's a shift in this industry, and we need to be talking about it, and not just talking about it, but we need to be empowering women, people of color, and and even men understanding, coming into this very female dominated industry, we should just be talking about the things that nobody's talking about." So I love that you're doing that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's part of what I learned too, where I work. I work at Spelman College, and it's a wonderful experience that I'm having there. But you've got to be willing to have those bold conversations, and difficult, critical conversations. And it can go beyond just color, race, gender. Like you said, having a seat at the table. EAs being able to speak up for themselves, admins being able to speak up for themselves, and being empowered to have those difficult conversations. It's not the easiest thing. I was wondering, I was like, how would people accept this? Are they thinking that I'm like I am just about race, or I'm just about color? No, I'm really just trying to create an avenue for others too to have difficult conversations, to ask questions. Well, what about this? What about that? What about the moments where you do feel like your voice is closed off, when you really have something to say in a meeting? All you're there for is taking minutes, right? But then you really can bring value when you hear a conversation about something that you're like, can I raise my hand and say, it's having those moments, because I've been in those places where I've only been called to the meeting to take minutes, but I know I have something valuable to say that can help steer the conversation, that I'm like, I know something about that, but then I feel afraid to not say something. So I think that with BAM, it's giving strength for people to be bold enough, for admins to be bold enough to say something, even if it's in the face of someone's going to be uncomfortable, someone's not going to like it, someone's not going to enjoy what you're saying, but that's okay, because it's your truth. It's your truth. And so I really see BAM as being that catalyst for conversations like that too. So
I do think it's an interesting process, because so many administrative professionals struggle with this piece of how do I find my voice? Is it appropriate for me to say something in a meeting? When should I kind of find my space and kind of own it? And they're going back to your point about empowerment, when there's a group surrounding you saying, yes, you should. It's okay that you have a voice and you should use it. Is very different than 10 years ago, when there was zero community out there and all of us are trying to finding our space. And then I think even recognizing when we are not okay, when someone else has confidence, or when someone else has found their voice, and how are we responding? Because I'm sure both of us could tell stories. I'm sure all of us could tell stories about people who don't empower one another because you have found your voice, or I love it. So I want to ask you this question, because I thought this was really interesting. So somebody wrote in, and if it's you and you feel like sharing and raising your hand, but somebody asked the question, so what career advice would the Nadine of today give the 12-year-old Nadine about reaching their goals and overcoming challenges? That's a fun question.
It really is. This just came to mind. Don't jump ship. There are times where you have to jump ship when things are difficult, but sometimes I think that when we disengage in tough moments, like we're talking about having these difficult conversations, the Nadine that started this profession 20 years ago probably would not be as bold, as I am now. And it would be easier to run the opposite direction when you hit a wall and say, I'm just not going to deal with it. When we're dealing with tough executives, type A's, whatever, colleagues that don't understand us, that are giving us problems, sometimes it's easier just to kind of take the back seat and disengage. So I would tell myself, in those difficult moments, don't jump ship, embrace it, and that
Yeah.
it's all going to be worth it. Everything, every challenge that I have faced, every failure, every wall that I hit, every moment I cried, because I had cried.
Lord knows.
You it's going to be worth it. And I would tell myself that from now, and if I could go back and just whisper in my ear, I think that I would have leaned in a little bit more in those moments and probably gleaned a lot more from those opportunities versus when I kind of pulled back, walked away from jobs or opportunities because it was just too tough. It was just too hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would tell myself it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it.
I think it's so interesting because it's even different. I think not only what you would say to yourself, but what would you say to someone that's newer, that's coming into the industry, because they don't have to deal with a lot of stuff. We've both been in the industry 20 plus years, because clearly we started when we were 4.
I started when I was 2.
Because I'm like, no, I'm not that old. I actually just realized, I'm like, I can't keep putting that out everywhere, because I don't know. Now that my kids are getting older, I feel like I'm crossing a whole different, like, it's harder for me that my daughter's almost 25 than my actual age, like I feel anyway. But
you look really, really good.
Thank you.
But we should change the conversation. I need to know what your secret is. Like, what are you drinking? What are you eating? What are you doing? What is your husband doing? Tell us that.
I mean, you know what though? It's funny because I just started really early, and that's part of my story, is that I was a teenage mom, and how I got into the industry was really kind of figuring that out, and how did I support my child, and
Right.
Being a teenage mom. And I like you, I never would have guessed that I would be doing this all these years later. I thought I would be in full-time ministry or something. I don't know. I never thought that I would be doing this, but yeah. So, but I wouldn't even say like what you would say to like a millennial, which is interesting because my daughter keeps telling me that I'm fairly close. But anyway, but what would you say to someone that's like newly coming into the industry and they haven't been here for 20 plus years and they haven't seen the evolution? What would you say to them?
That is very difficult, right? Because when we think about what we went through, it's like these millennials they see a different road that seems more easier, like an easier path where they're like, I don't see it that way, and so having those because I have those conversations where I'm, coaching, and they're like, I don't see, and you're like, these lessons that I've learned in this difficult path, are valuable, but they don't see it because they see it easier way. They're like, I don't have to go that route. I don't have to deal with that. When you're like talking about managing temperaments and you're like, this is how you do it. And it's like, but why? I've had that conversation where I'm like, if you had a difficult moment with an executive, right? And their personality is type A, and they said something to you very dry, very direct, how would you handle it? Right? We've learned I'm giving an example here. We've learned in experience that some things you bite the bullet, you run with it, and you manage it, right? And you navigate. They will say, well, I would speak to them about it. Like, why do you have an attitude? Or, I would tell my supervisor, this person is doing this, this, and this. And you're just kind of like, that's just not how it works, So, I'm still trying to figure out how to have, if I can be honest, when you're dealing with millennials, you try to give them wisdom, in certain ways, and practical application. But when you're dealing with different generations in the workforce, I think we're all trying to figure out how to transfer our knowledge to them, and sharing and helping and coaching them because they have a different mindset, so, just off the bat, I would say my first thing I tell them if I'm coaching a millennial is I need you to be open to what I'm saying, because it's going to be helpful for you in your career journey. sometimes there's shortcuts, but most times there isn't a shortcut. And in this profession, when you are seasoned, and you know how to manage executives, you manage up, like you get to that level where you're managing temperament, you have to be willing to take what I'm saying. If not, you're not going to be as successful in this role. So
the thing that I really appreciate about working with a variety of generations is that I personally have dealt with this new girl versus old girl mindset in the EA function. I don't know, has anybody else on the chat, have any of you guys ever dealt with that? Like, you're the new person and people can't stand you because but I think the challenging part with that is that it's a real thing. And if you've been in the field for a long time, you have a tendency to, if someone new comes along and they have a different idea or a different way or, whatever, or if people, for example, if they're like, oh, I love my Google or I love my Mac, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I already don't like you. You're not my friend. No, I'm just kidding. But you have these old mindsets, and when people come in, you can feel affronted and feel like, well, wait, is what you're saying is that I've been doing something wrong for 20 years? And then on the flip side, some of those that are just now coming into the industry who are really frustrated with all of that stuff that's kind of going, well, I don't understand why they've done that, or why did they do it this way? And they don't want to learn from the years of experience. It can cause such a clash. And I think it's just so important that you go into it knowing that that's actually a thing. And you have to be really flexible to learn from years of experience. And then, as well as learning from new ideas and new concepts. It's funny because when I asked these questions, for example, and I'd love to hear you guys in the chat if you guys want to tell me what you guys think of the phrase admin work, and then the phrase assistant versus like executive business partner. It's so interesting because those who've been in the industry for a really long time, almost all of them will say, I hate the phrase assistant. I hate the phrase admin work. But a lot of times those that are younger that are coming into the industry have no opinion about it. And they're like, it doesn't bother me, which I think is really interesting. So you kind of have to have that give and take with each other and be determined that you're going to learn from someone else. And eventually you can convince me that I'm going to like Google at some point, but I'm not. No. Like ride or die on Microsoft. But it's just one of those things that for me, I know I've learned, for me, that is a non-negotiable, and kind of figuring out what some of those things are as you've grown in your career, where I think when you're just now coming into the industry, you may not know what some of your non-negotiables are.
Yeah.
Do you have any non-negotiables?
At this point in my career?
Yeah.
I am not going to, can we come back to that? Because I don't think I do. I really don't. I think you ever get to a place where you are confident in what you do, and you're good at it, and you can take what's thrown at you. So I got to think about that. Do I have any non-negotiables? It's an interesting question. We can come back to that one.
I think for me, when I started, I sort of had this really bad experience with this executive who I let really impact. My husband likes to say, I let them take my mojo for like 6 months. It was really hard for me. They were just abusive as a person. And it took me a long time, but I also, to get over some of that behavior. But I did also learn what worked and what didn't work for me. And I think now where I'm at in my career, I've learned that I'm a strategist and I'm not an activator. And I don't partner well with someone who's an activator and not a strategist, because my brain thinks a certain way, and I like to accomplish my work in a certain way. And so for me, I think learning some of those lessons of how do you look back at your failure, and how do you look back at some big mistakes and go, okay, what do I want to learn from that, and take on with my career. So I think my only big non-negotiable is understanding if they want me to have a seat at the table, because I am who I am, and I've been doing this a long time, so I'm probably not going to change at this point. But then 2, making sure that whoever I'm partnering with, like I don't partner well with the CMO.
Mhm.
So partnering somebody with and someone that's like operations, absolutely. And it's okay to find your niche. And you're in higher education. So
Yeah.
was that like a niche that you kind of fell into or that you chose, or how did you get into higher ed?
Yeah, I just kind of fell into it. It was a position that I applied for when I started off at a law school, and then it just kind of went from there. That I went from one institution to another institution to another institution. So I've been in higher ed for over 10 years,
Wow.
and so it's been a great journey, and I wouldn't change it. And I actually enjoy working in higher ed. I do want to visit back what you said though, when you said non-negotiables, because when I think about my personality, I'm a pioneer. All the tests that I've taken, I'm a creative and I'm a pioneer. So for me, I guess when you said that, I was kind of thinking, I've had moments where I'll say, I'll never assist anybody that is like this. But then in my mindset, I love challenges,
Yeah.
always been. And I think that's what this role for me has done, that it's
Mhm.
like it's given me the opportunity to be challenged because I
Yeah.
get bored fast. And so for me, it's like at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, I don't typically want to if I don't have to deal with someone that's very type A, very like boom, 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 or in some way. Of course, nobody wants to be abused or anything like that.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? I'll take the challenge. I'll take that challenge because it's going to make me better. It's going to make me, you know, uh, sharper than what I am now. So I love to be creative and pioneer through situations, and you know uh, deal with people that most people will be like, I can't be her or his assistant, and I'm like, I'll take it. I'll
I
try.
actually had, I think one of my best partnerships was someone who I was told, like, oh my gosh, he's going to eat meat with you for 5 minutes. He doesn't actually like to be around humans. He's an engineer. But what I find
I
is
did an
like,
engineer too. I assisted
they're
an engineer.
hard. Oh
They're
my
hard.
goodness. They're like no joke. But what I found is he actually built the Microsoft Rubin. So we geeked out together for a really long time. But what I actually found from him is that he just missed doing his job. And what I love about a really strategic EA is that when you get to that point where you're able to move out of that very tactical piece and think really strategically, you're able to kind of figure out. So what I did is I analyzed his calendar and figured out that he was spending 40% of his time on one-on-ones. And for someone who didn't really like to be around like that level of,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it wasn't impactful to the role. And so we just made one switch and he completely turned around because he had more time to like focus in on what he loved doing, which was being an engineer. He didn't have the opportunity to do it. So I do love the fact that when you are a strategic thinker, even if you can still be an activator. And when I mean an activator, I mean someone who is, they get an email and they get FOMO if they have something in their inbox, like they have to give it out. They're very do. They're the
Yeah.
admin that's like walking, and then a strategist in my mind is someone who's much more like, hey, I could care less that it's in my inbox because I'm thinking strategically about my priorities to get it done in a
Yeah.
certain way.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by the two. Yeah. And so, but when you are able to focus in on that, you can fix some of those problems and take on the problem execs.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple questions in our Q&A. So someone said, what about the reverse, where there's an older seasoned admins haven't evolved and updated their methods and ways of approaching their jobs for the better? That's an issue in our company, and it can be frustrating, and you can't tell them anything because they've been there 500 years. I love it. Been there, done that. Just saying.
Yeah.
I can raise my hand and be like, yes.
I'm wondering though, are you able to influence any change in this particular situation? I don't know who's asked the question. Um, are you able to? So whoever asked that question, maybe they can give us that backup.
Let's assume they can't.
If we assume that they can't, you know, I guess if you're having to interact, I'm a supporter of just kind of doing things that fit for you.
Yeah.
I'm in situations where, if because we all have our own execs, but we may have to come together for certain processes or certain things that we have to connect on. And if that person owns the process or that person is not budging, you kind of gracefully deal with that person in the way that you can. But when it comes back to you and what you do for your executive, just do what's necessary to make sure your executive has what they need. And I don't see, I don't have the magic wand or the comment to say, this is how you can change somebody. You can create motivating environments. You can't motivate people to change.
Yeah.
Motivation comes from within. So, if I can create buzz around a new process or create buzz around, collaboration around this new idea, hopefully that person becomes motivated to come in and make the positive change. But if not, I just have to keep trucking, keep going and doing what I need to do. So, I think that's important to always remain at the level of being progressive and not allowing other EAs that are not progressive, that are kind of stuck in their ways, to pull you from that place. So
I would say the thing for me, so my suggestion would be, I think it's about relationship. And then, understanding why they feel that way. Do they feel that way because they feel like they don't have a voice and you do? And so, I kind of experienced this where I had an executive who I didn't support, but they were interested in me teaching them technology. And so I was meeting with them, and the EA was very offended because he would never spend time with her just on a one-on-one. And so there may be things like going on in the background that you don't know, like you don't know why they're acting that way or why they just don't want to come along. And I will say that I would agree with you. I'm absolutely a pioneer. I'm someone in the company that's like, hey, we should be doing this and this and this and this. And sometimes you can't bring everyone along.
Right.
But I would say build relationships with them and try to understand why they don't want to come along. And just be as kind to them as you can, because sometimes I think they just need to let someone know that I'm not trying to take your job. I'm trying to help.
And like I said, I think the point as far as collaboration, just creating those collaborative environments where, you start dialogues, conversations about it. And sometimes people just don't budge, and if they budge, it becomes a matter of you looking internally to say, am I going to allow this to change me, or am I going to allow it to, I call it sandpaper moments, when I talk to and I coach EAs, I'm always telling them, look at some situations as sandpaper moments. Brush up against that person, even if they get on your nerves, they're not changing, and let it polish you. Because at the end, they may lose out, but you won't if you use it as a learning experience. Because if you're always thinking, well, how can I get them to move? How can I get them to change? And you've tried certain types of methods, well, maybe sometimes it's about how can you change your perspective? How can you look at the situation differently? And just lean in and let them polish you, and you'll become better. And when you move on to the next thing, you'll look back in hindsight and be like, man, look how I handled that situation. Hey, look what I did.
So Tanisha's wondering, you have a bracelet that has a word on it. What's your word and why?
Oh, this? Oh, it says Kingdom Woman.
Hey,
Kingdom Woman. So thank you. Yes.
Okay, so we were talking about this the other day. So going into some of these other questions, somebody had asked about certifications and if they're worth it and if they're beneficial. And I know you and I both have pretty strong feelings that are probably not what everybody else is going to say.
Well, they're not going to want to.
I'll let you go ahead and yeah.
I don't think they're worth. I don't think they're worth it. I think we both agree on the whole cookie cutter, type of training that's out there where people are not really being. I went to a training once, and I had a counterpart reach back out to me and ask me, because I'm kind of good with words. She said, "Can you help me answer my boss's questions?" Because they wanted to understand the value of the classes that she took and
Yeah.
how it transferred or related to the work. And the particular question was not necessarily, it was, he wasn't clear on how much of what was learned was actually transferred over to work, or if it was just her wanting to do a better job.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've had those conversations about, the cookie cutter, the inspirational training. You've got to have some training that really translates into measured success, measured,
Yeah.
not just motivation, not just, this is how you do it, do a good job. No, like you're Microsoft certified, I'm Google certified. How
Yeah.
can, tech skills be expanded upon, so when EAs come into the job, they are really bringing measurable success and changing the environment in certain ways, not because they're just motivated and happy on, certain aspects. So I haven't really checked out the certifications, but I believe that becoming certified in some sort of technology or
Yes.
some sort of, process and project management is more important than, I'm not going to name the names, certifications that,
Blah, 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 blah.
blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. So that's my take on it. That's
Yeah.
my bold take on it.
Yeah. I would agree with you because I think that it's very internal, and most people outside of the industry have zero idea what any
They
of
have
those
no
mean.
knowledge of it. They have no knowledge of it.
Even weirdly enough, when people like, what does it mean to be a certified Microsoft trainer? And I'm like, okay, well, exactly what it says. But even
Microsoft.
like clearly. But I will say that when you're thinking about training, is it critical in the role? Yes. But that's why I think there's a group of us that are trying to step away from what's the the typical training that's out there happening, and we're trying to do something different.
Yeah.
Because it's not training that I necessarily, there are some workshops and conferences that I did not find value as a full-time EA. And so, that's why Nadine and I are trying to provide other content that's really actionable, that, it's, if you're functioning at a really high level, you may not need to have a conversation of how to have a difficult conversation, just generic. You might need to deep dive with someone about how do you have a difficult conversation with this specific issue, or how do you increase your technology skills in this area so that you can run faster. So those are things that don't happen at the big conferences that I think are critical, but not that many people are doing them. So
yeah,
I'm glad you got to be you got to be all extra bold on that one. Okay, so this is a question that I am super passionate about, and I know you are too, is about measuring and quantifying your work. How do you do that? And I have thoughts on how I do it. Do you quantify? Do you have? I know we chatted about this before, but how do you quantify what you do so that you kind of remember at the end of the year for your performance review?
Well, of course, other than my, things that I track, it depends on the scope of what, so I'm 100% responsible for my boss's calendar, which takes a lot of time. I'm 100% responsible, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you are 100% responsible for your boss's calendar. That includes plugging in meetings, briefing them for the meeting, right?
Yeah.
So making sure they have all the materials, all the notes for every meeting, because from day to day, they're not paying attention to what's coming down the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
You're the one prioritizing these things. You're paying attention to emails, you're paying attention to conversations to know, okay, this one needs to happen here, this needs to happen here, this is what's happening, this board meeting is coming up, these are the documents, right? That calendar is very much a measurable thing, you
Yeah.
know? So when I come from my performance evaluation, I've printed out the calendar for the academic year, every day, every month, and then at the end of it, this is how many meetings you can calculate. You've had 50 meetings this month, you
Yeah.
know, this amount of material was given to you for these particular meetings. So that's measurable, right? Because then that's showing how you support, and that's breaking it down into buckets, because sometimes we just do these things out of second nature and we're not thinking about that these are tasks and this is how you're saving time. So what does this look like? You can even go down to the minutes to say, because we know it may take, depending on if it's a group meeting, you can figure out what it takes to kind of get those group meetings going. Those doodles, how many doodles you sent out, how many emails you sent out, sometimes just keeping those little ticklers for larger things that you could kind of give your executive an idea, So for this particular meeting, it took 5 doodles, it took 10 emails, for me to send out to rally everybody up to get them in for this meeting. And so if we think about our work from a data perspective, and we think about our work from that lens, then we are setting ourselves up for success instead of looking at it from the end of just, this is just what I do. Because if you don't, then they're not seeing it that way. They're seeing it the same way you're seeing it. And so you come to the table, I scheduled 100 meetings, over the course of the last 5 months. I've given you this many briefing documents. This many people attended the meetings. I prepared files for this many people. This many action items, So when you've got your write-ups, like if you chair the committee meetings or whatever, right? And you've got action items, I made sure that these action items were completed, so you have to sit down and take that time to measure out your day. So how do I keep up with that throughout the year? I actually have moments where I say, I'm taking 10 minutes out of my day to kind of organize. What have I done today? I scheduled 10 meetings and I keep that little tickler going. So at the end, when it's time to sit down, you've got measurable things, right? And they're not just like, oh, because, your boss, they don't know. They think the meeting just appeared on their calendar. It's like, oh, okay, this person's in my office. Do you know how many conversations that took? Do you know how many times I had to call? So those are ways to measure and quantify your work. So
yeah, and I would totally agree with that. And I would say when you're thinking about how you quantify over the last year, I always caution admins, because typically if you have not worked on this process, you will get reviewed based on your last 3 months of performance. And if you've crushed it all year long, that might be great. But if you're struggling or you're having some issues those last 3 months, because what we do is so unique and it's hard to quantify. So I would say make sure that whatever your performance goals are, that they are very measurable. If you have this sort of random, I'm going to help, Nadine be better at blah, blah, blah. Well, nobody can measure that. And it can really be based on feelings at the end of the year. And you want to avoid that. So making sure that you're being very intentional and really quantifying those goals so that you can look back and be measurable. And when you're thinking about, I like to bucket all the things that you talked about. I call it workflow optimization,
right.
Because you're optimizing both your workflow and your executive's workflow. So I guess my suggestion for whoever asked that question was just make sure that you keep a list all year long and that you can quantify them based on those measurable goals. Right. And that line, if your goals are not specific enough or they're just generic, then you're kind of up to how they feel you've been doing versus what you've actually done.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. Someone said, how do you navigate it all successfully? You have a lot of, balls in the air. So how do you manage it all?
I pray. No,
Right.
seriously, I do. My faith has a big to do with navigating it all, because at the end of the day, I don't care what people say, and if I can just be genuine and honest, people, want to appear to be, especially women, we're high powered and we've got it all together. And, and yes, we can be successful and we can be confident in that, but there is a support system that you do have and that you lean on in order to be successful. And at the top of my support system is prayer and my faith and my belief. So, I pray every day. I'm like, Lord, help me do my job, better. Let me, be successful in what I do, because it doesn't bring me glory, it brings you glory. And so, whatever your faith is, whatever you believe, understanding that you've got to have a great support system around you in order to navigate it all. My husband is a great support system, and he has my back, and having him there to cheer me on, go, 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 you can do this. And that's how I navigate it. I mean, I lean on my family, I lean on my faith, because if I didn't have that, I couldn't be successful. I couldn't navigate much of anything. I'd probably just fall apart. So,
Right.
I that's how I do it. I have no magic. That's how I do it.
I always like to remind women that it's okay not to always be on it all the time. And it's okay to give yourself that grace. Just like you and I were chatting about this the other day, it's like we don't often give ourselves the same grace we would give someone else. And I think that's one way. I was feeling it last week. Last week, I was like, I've just been going too hard and fast for the last however many weeks. And I was just like, I can't even. And I've learned that that's okay, right? We don't always have to be crushing it all the time. It's okay to just be like, you know what? My husband and I often be like, I'm quitting. For those of you that don't know, my husband and I work together in this business. And he's like, that's fine, babe. Just make sure you show up for work tomorrow. Like, you can quit tonight, all you want, but just make sure that you're here. Okay, so we have a question on YouTube. And so someone who's joining us on YouTube asked the question, do you journal your ratios or include them in your planner and remind, to remind you at your performance review time?
You said, do I journal?
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I read the question for.
So it says, do you journal your ratios or include them in your planner and remind? Yep, I can hear you. We can't see you anymore, but we can hear you. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Okay.
So I think this was about the question about how do you track your performance reviews? I journal. I don't know. Do you journal or do you use a planner?
Yes, I journal. I use OneNote. So
I'm cracking up. Do you really? I love that you are a Google person and you use OneNote.
I am a Google person. I use OneNote. The reason why is because I use Google for my business, but my job is actually 365, Microsoft 365.
Oh.
So, yeah. So so I've got the two of them going at the same time, but I do use OneNote. So I do journal and kind of keep track, and that's how I put everything in there. And it's easier at the end of the year to kind of go back and print all the calendar lists, because I have the tabs for calendar to do things that I've done. And
my dog has decided that she does not like.
Hey. So yeah, but I use OneNote.
Yeah, I do think that the thing for me is, I will say, to answer this question, is that, hi Jackson, thanks for joining us on YouTube. So for me, when I try to track all of my stuff, I have started, because I'm such a tech person, I have realized that I really do enjoy very, tactile piece of writing and journaling down. So I'm a huge proponent of OneNote, but also when I'm thinking about, for my power hour, I usually do it on Sunday nights. I kind of come home after church on Sunday nights and do no like TV or anything like that. And I just kind of hone in and say, okay, what do I need to accomplish this week for work and my personal life and for work, and really just try to highlight it that way. And then it's really easy for me, because so for those of you that still do the very tactical piece and you have a power hour, I would highly suggest you using those goals that you're trying to accomplish for the week,
right,
then you can kind of circle back around for the end of the year. So I love it. Okay, so we have a couple more questions online. So the question is, you both are still full-time employed. Are you thinking of transitioning out of your role? And are your organizations supporting you out of that transition, or will you be attached to your current employer? So for me, I just switched to training full-time in October of last year. So I'm no longer a full-time EA, but I still, which I really miss my executive, but we still get to kind of connect. So I'm no longer working full-time as an EA, but Nadine is doing it all.
Doing it all. I love Spelman. I love Spelman College. And so right now my plan is to work there. I support the mission there, and my daughter will be going to Spelman. I'm putting that out there. So, but yeah, for right now, my boss is very supportive of my growth and has really invested in me. And so I'm in a good place, and it works for me right now to be where I'm at. I think if it was any other organization, it might be different. The response would be different. But yeah, for right now, that's where I'm at, and that's where I'm staying. If I were to transition, I'm sure my boss would probably not be happy about that. She'd be like, "Where are you going?" But for me right now, it works, and it works even with me doing what I'm doing now and working and things like that. So I'm staying put for right now.
Yeah, I think the interesting part is that if you have, when you find the right fit with the right executive,
Yeah.
they're going to be really supportive of you and what you're trying to do. And if they're not, there's always opportunities to move on. I think that sometimes we feel that we kind of have to just put up with stuff. And I know that sometimes our family situations might require us to kind of have to sit in a role a little bit longer than you might need to. But if you can get out, if your executive is not supportive or, doesn't see the value in your role, then I'm out. I mean, you don't have to sit somewhere just because
Right.
just because you feel stuck. And if you don't have an executive who supports you, then yeah, definitely not. Okay, so there was another question that said, so basically this EA was given an extra executive with no communication, and there was no salary increase or anything like that. How do you handle that situation when you're kind of added to without any background into, hey, we're going to increase your salary, or hey, by the way, you're going to have an extra workload? So how do you handle that?
If it's not in my job description, I would have the conversation. I mean, if it was an expectation that I was supporting just one exec, and that and my job description is based on that, and no conversation has been had about that change, I would go to HR. I mean, and have an open, honest conversation to say, this is what I expected. This is what's in my job description. And is this going to change, or if it's not? And then you'll know where to go from there. I would have a conversation.
Okay. So we have another question that says, after 30 years in the business, I try to stay current to continue being successful in my professional career, but sometimes it's overwhelming. What's your advice?
After 30 years, I've tried to stay.
So it's really just about how do you stay current after 30 years? I think it's probably going back to the conversation that we had earlier about when you've been in the business for a really long time, how do you keep current?
First read. I read a lot. I've got a couple of things that I subscribe to, articles. It could be anything that you have an interest in, but just kind of finding things to read and engage with, maybe joining some groups and some organizations, like following Melissa will help you stay.
You're sweet.
I think that's my number one tip, is just read, maybe get certified in something, get certified in, project management or Google or some type of tech. I'm always looking for new technology updates. So I follow Tech Insider. There's some things on LinkedIn that you can do for training to kind of stay fresh and up to date. So,
yeah, I always like to remind people that having a productivity plan and understanding where you're trying to go in your career is critical. And so if you don't have one, you sort of feel like, I don't know, what should I do and what should I pick and what should I work on? But if you have a really thought out plan about where you want to go in your career and how you're going to get there, it makes it so much easier to stay current, to like we were talking about earlier about the training, find the training that's actually going to be applicable to you and help you drive success in your career versus just sort of trying to pull things out of what you think makes sense, right? So if you want to take more on, then you should be asking yourself, do I have the time to take more on? If I don't have the time, then what's wasting my time and how do I open that space up? So if you guys go to my YouTube channel or my website, and if you comment on there that you joined us today, I can send you I'll send you my productivity plan. And then you guys it's just a way for you to think through on, what does that look like for you? So it makes it easier for you when you are trying to stay current. Okay, so we only have a couple more minutes. So does anybody, if you have any other questions, like last chance to ask Nadine any questions, but what is where can people follow you, or how can they reach out to connect with you and all that good stuff?
I'm on LinkedIn, of course. I'm at Nadine King. I also have a couple of websites, www.thekingscourt.com, and Kings is spelled with a Z. So that's THEKINGZ court.com. And you can also follow me at www.blackadminmagic.com. And we are on Facebook as well. And, but yeah, that's it. That's it. If you want to reach out to me.
And then I would definitely say that on your, so on her website, and you can actually go get her book. They can order your book on your thekingscourt.com.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today. I had so much fun. I'm so glad that we got to go live and just kind of hang out. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to both Nadine and I. We'd be happy to help you guys further. And thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you guys have an amazing Saturday, y'all.
I know, but thank you, Melissa, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm humbled by this experience, and I hope that something that was shared today is very helpful to everyone. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Welcome. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday.